2020, a year like no other, a global pandemic, a social justice movement globally, a year that changed the way we work, the way we interact with each other, and the environment around us. One of the key things, though, that the last year showed us was how important diversity and inclusion is. We had to adapt to the new norm of working from home. We had to create inclusion through virtual environments. Yet we learned so much about each other through these platforms. We learned why it's important to tackle and fight racism globally, but more so, how we can go beyond tackling racism to being anti-racist and actively fighting the fight against racism. Diversity and inclusion has played an integral part in supporting people during this period of time. Organizations that adapted diversity and inclusion prior to last year were in a much better position to adapt to the changing environment. So those that already had great policies for remote working were able to quickly move into the new norm of working from home. Organizations who had already gone on the journey of creating equity and inclusion within the workplace from a race and ethnicity perspective were able to build on some of the great stuff they'd already done. Diversity and inclusion is not a concept that only emerged in the last 12 months. Since the beginning of time, we've always had differences, whether that be our race and ethnicity, our gender, our sexual orientation, different abilities, and yet we've always brought those together to create true inclusion. We've made so many advancements in technology, in construction, in everything around us, through coming together and harnessing the power of thinking differently, harnessing the opportunities that true diversity brings. Organizations have focused on diversity and inclusion for a number of reasons. Many understand the legal requirements that exist in many countries to create equality of opportunity for different groups and different people. Many get the moral case, the importance of doing this, the fact that this is the right thing to do. However, one of the things that has been evident in the last couple of months is that diversity and inclusion is no longer just a nice thing to do or something we do because we have a legal requirement. The business case, the business imperative is huge. Organizations who get diversity and inclusion right are more profitable, have better engagement with their customers or their service users. There's numerous examples of organizations that have truly harnessed the power of diversity and inclusion, which has resulted in those two very key points of profitability and better interaction with their customers. There's also examples of organizations who haven't embedded diversity and inclusion, or might have got diversity and inclusion wrong, and they've had huge reputational damage as a result of it. So clearly, there's a business benefit to diversity and inclusion, and getting it wrong has consequences. Therefore, it's really important that we start to look at how can we embed true diversity and inclusion across our business to create those exceptional results, those exceptional products, better output. Let me remind you that diversity is not a problem we're trying to solve. It is truly an opportunity we need to embrace. To transform the space of D&I, we need to think differently. We need to challenge ourselves in different ways. We need to start looking at how we build diversity and inclusion into the DNA of our organizations, into every element of our workplace. Because D&I doesn't sit with one person or one team. The responsibility for D&I is everyone's. D&I is one of those things that is critical to our strategies going forward as we transform in the future, but not as an additional item, but as a foundation to those strategies around growth and innovation. But to understand the true transformation we need, we must break diversity and inclusion down to understand where the gaps lie and how we can transform that space to the next level. So let's take diversity, a concept that we've talked about for a number of years. The differences, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, disability, socioeconomic background, neurodiversity, and so on. Those are different elements of diversity. However, the truth is, no one person is one element of diversity. No one is only representing their difference through the visible differences that we see. Diversity truly means different things to different people. Intersectionality means that we have multiple layers to our unique, authentic identities. And if we're truly going to harness the power of those differences, we have to understand that we have to allow that choice within individuals. When people join our organizations, they should have the choice of what elements of diversity represent them. We should not assign a particular area to them based on what we see. We should always allow individuals to determine what that looks like. It's also important to acknowledge within that diversity is not an exclusive club. Diversity is about each and every one of us. Every single individual brings something different to the table. We all have differences. But bringing those differences together is critical, and ensuring that each and every person in your organization understands the importance of diversity and inclusion. And also the fact that if we make advancements in a particular area of diversity, it benefits everyone because we create equality, equity, better processes that allow every single person to get to that unique, authentic identity. Inclusion, a word I hear more and more. Many organizations strive to create true inclusion in the workplace. Let me ask you, is inclusion truly the end goal for D&I? Let's put that in an example. Let's say we have a board that's predominantly male, or a team, and a woman joins that team. We've got diversity, we've got inclusion because she's now part of the team. But really and truly, if I ask you, is she able to be her authentic self? And are we reaping the benefits of that diversity? The truth, majority of the time, is no, because people have to adapt to the environments to fit in. We don't view things from a cultural add perspective. We view from a cultural fit perspective. But to truly move the dial, we need to go beyond just being included. We need to create psychological safety. We need to create trust within teams. We need to create environments where people can bring their authentic self. Then we start to harness the power of diversity and inclusion to achieve those exceptional objectives that I mentioned earlier. And that's where the concept of belonging comes in. Each and every one of us wants to belong. We want to belong to our families from a very young age. We want to belong at work. But it's important to acknowledge that if we create that sense of belonging for our staff, then we start to reap the benefits of diversity and inclusion. Belonging isn't a new concept. As I mentioned, from a very young age, we always want to belong to different groups, whether it be to our family, to different groups in school, and so on. But what is evident and clear is when we have that sense of belonging, we feel happiness. Our well-being improves. We're more motivated to do better. Within our teams, when we create that sense of belonging, it unites us. We have better ideas, more innovation, better performance as a team because we're getting all these different ideas. And for organizations, if individuals have a sense of belonging, they're more likely to stay longer with a company, and they're more likely to bring that innovation that we strive for, that we look for, that competitive edge that every single company wants. We gain that through allowing that difference to flourish in our environments. Now, the key and critical question is, how do we get to that sense of belonging? And I have a few key elements, I believe, create that. The first one being that we must create safe spaces. We must create a culture within our organizations that allows for differences to flourish. We must create that psychological safety I mentioned. How do we do it? Well, we value difference. We listen to perspectives that are different to ours and value them. We allow people to give a different view, a different opinion, and yet do it in a way that people feel empowered. People don't feel scared to go against the norm, but see it as a benefit to bring a different perspective. When we do that, we find normal patterns are disrupted, and that disruption brings about new ways of thinking, new ways of doing things. We must also look at processes that we have within our workplaces. Diversity and inclusion doesn't require that 100, 200,000 pound, dollar, euro program. What it requires us to do is to break the processes we currently have, to see where are the gaps, what more can we do to shift and move the dial on diversity and inclusion to that, creating a sense of belonging. But in order to do that, we need to break down what we've done traditionally and see what are the adjustments, what are the changes we can bring within those processes to drive change. We must also look at how do we simplify the conversations around diversity and inclusion. I hear and I see so much fear of getting it wrong, so much fear of saying the wrong thing. However, we need to create environments where we can learn and grow, where we can respect differences, different perceptions, lived experiences. We don't have to agree on the same thing. That's the beauty of diversity. We all think differently. But what we can agree on is that we can come together to create inclusion and that sense of belonging. But in order to do that, we must learn. And we must see diversity and inclusion as a journey, a sustainable journey of transformation, not a one-off, not an action, but something we truly embed across our business, something we weave into all our processes, something that we create that allows us not to have to think about it separately, but it just becomes the norm in our day-to-day interactions. And that brings me to a point that I feel very strongly about, which is we must simplify diversity and inclusion. Each and every one of us can engage on this topic. We need to go back to simplifying D&I. When was the last time you asked someone how they're doing? When was the last time you gave someone in a meeting an opportunity to speak up? When was the last time you went for lunch with someone who you've never been to lunch with before? These are small things, but these are opportunities to learn and grow. These are opportunities we can harness to create that true inclusion. Diversity is no longer an option. It is a business imperative, as I mentioned. But to truly drive that change, we must understand that it's each and every one of our responsibilities. We can be that change we want to see in the world. But to do that, we must all own this journey. We must make it one of those elements that becomes the culture of our organization. Once we achieve that, we will see results. We will see exceptional results. The future is all about diversity, inclusion, and that creating that sense of belonging. It is not an option. What you must reflect on is how you're going to go on that journey and how you're going to embrace the fact that diversity and inclusion is not a problem. It is truly an opportunity, and one that you embrace. And if you do embrace, we'll see exceptional results, both for your organization and for the very people that run your organizations.